Hi, this is the video for Wednesday, March 17th. Today we're looking at structure, but we're going to take a little detour or a zoom in to 6D and explain what illusions are. We will look at the Atlantic Slave to build background knowledge, and we'll look at illusions in Middle Passage, and we'll be ready for today. I've got a brief activity where you will help me find the illusion home, and then we'll tie all of that together in your BGD for today, which is time to it's about 15 minutes to give yourself the first analysis paragraph to the prompt. Explain how the structure of Middle Passage illustrates the meaning of the poem as a whole. Consider stance patterns, enjambment, and illusion. So let's check videos here. So we started with this warm-up question about poem from yesterday, and I just asked, what is it about? It's about milk, and it's important that as Hayden's Middle Passage poem, you have background knowledge about it. So this video, which you can click on for this slide, it's about 5 minutes, it's really good, put out by TEDx on the Atlantic slave trade, and it gives you a lot of the textures and details that show up in the poem. For example, the complexity of the trade systems that were already in place for slavery before slaves came to America. I shouldn't say came, were brought to America. And then it goes into the details about the African slave trade, which shows up in the poem as well. So it's good to know the history. It's really important to know the history. It doesn't explain the story of the Amistad, which is a really important part of the poem at the end. A good illusion, if you're interested in studying that for the BGD today. But it does briefly mention that sometimes the slaves below deck were able to overpower the crew on board. And that's all told in the Amistad story at the end. So check it out. Here's Hayden. He was born in 1913, died in 1980. He was born Asa Bundy Sheffield in Detroit, changed his name to Robert Hayden. He was the very first African-American serving as U.S. Poet Laureate, though it wasn't called that at the time. He studied poetry. He studied under W.H. Auden. We read that brief poem about Icarus. That was by Auden. And he wrote at the peak of the Black Arts movement in the 50s and 60s, but he was dissociated from them in some ways. He said it was really important to him that he was identified as an American poet, or as a poet, and not just as a black poet, as he put it. He thought that Black Arts movement was important because it was calling attention to lots of issues and themes that were good for human people to know, good for humanity to know. So he didn't completely align with all of the Black Arts movement artists who really believed that black empowerment, specifically of black issues for the black community, would be what brought esteem and notoriety as was deserved to black people in America. So he kind of, in the interesting history of him, was sort of and apart from that. Anyway, a lot of what he chose to write about were issues at the center of black experience in America, and you see that in the poem today. To write the poem, he had to conduct 2 years of historical research about the transatlantic slave voyages, at a time where that was really not being done. So it's not like today where you can go find a TEDx on it pretty fast. In the 1940s, when he wrote this poem, he had to get into primary sources and really become the historian. He packed dozens of allusions into the poem. As a result of his historical research, he gained all of this knowledge and he put in the poem. But he also impacts the structure with his literary allusions, which just comes from his richness of background in poetry and poetic studies. So what is allusion? Well, 6D in the standards for AP Lit is identifying the function of allusion, so you do need to know what it is. It's a part of structure, but it also straddles into the figurative language world. Allusions tap into the connotations of what they refer to. So if you're alluding to a song, as often happens when you're sampling, you're bringing in all the connotations that come with that song. Allusions allow readers to create meaning of their own using their background knowledge. And because they rely on your background knowledge, they also shut out readers who don't understand those parts of history. So they become a little bit of an elitism, allusions, but not in a bad way. I'm going to offer for this poem a really important way. There can be historical, cultural, literary, mythological, or religious allusions. It's just anytime you refer to something that's proper noun, it's outside of the text that's important to the world, and that you bring it in. And it's a really big concept. The only way to know an illusion is to have known about the thing it's alluding to. So it's really a way of stacking up all our knowledge together. Like he does in this one. Illusions impact structure in two ways. One, they impact the content. So they co-opt everything that content represents. It's like archetype. If you're using an archetype of the Earth Mother, you're tapping into the universal truth that is known about people who are connected to the Earth. If you are using an allusion to Shakespeare, you're tapping into everything Shakespeare represents. It also impacts the physical structure and form. In Hayden's case, where he alludes to these other pieces outside of his text, he steals their structure too, right? He uses the melody line. He makes that a part of his poem. Here's an example. I'm going to get into 3 examples. I'll make this a little bigger. The first example is to a song. So he's writing about the ships that are bringing these enslaved people over to the Americas. And he writes, Jesus, Savior, pilot me over life's tempestuous sea. That is a direct allusion from a traditional religious hymn called Jesus, Savior, pilot me. It's right there in the title. And then again, Jesus. And then one more time in the poem, he says, pilot me, oh pilot me. So he is using the structure here in the poem to look like the song. It's got the spaces to try to break apart those words to make you think of the shoes. Slow yourself down and hear the melody. So he's stealing that structure, stealing like an artist, a good kind. And what it does for the content, why we use it. It makes a lot of sense if you read it in the context of the whole section here. The next little tercet really brings it home. He's taking on the voice of a trade with a D, trader. We pray that thou, God, will grant, O Lord, safe passage to our vessels, bringing heathen souls unto thy choosing. So this is a prayer of someone who's trading slaves and saying, God, please get my boat safely across the sea so that I can bring more of these enslaved people to Christianity. There's a deep irony there that he's trying to draw our attention to with this song. They might be singing, Jesus, Savior, pilot me across the sea. Be with me, Jesus, as I embark on this journey. The subtext there is the journey is one with human cargo shipped from their home to a new world where they will have no rights. So religious language to cover up a deeply immoral or amoral trade. That is the effect of the song. The song in its fullness is here, and it's all about this idea of protection, refuge, strength that these people find in Jesus. A Jesus who is being linked to the slave trade in a way that is meant to be, through Hayden's eyes, deeply ironic. The people being chastened shouldn't be the souls, but the people who are trading those souls. So that's one way. Another illusion. This here is tercet, deep in the festering hole that Father lies. Those are ultralights that were his eyes. This is a direct allusion to Tempest by Shakespeare. So one of his last plays, it's actually, I think it is his last play. And in it are some really famous lines about a character who drowned. So Ariel, this little sprite, this spirit, sings about the drowned man. And she sings, full 5 and 5, your father lies. Of his bones are coral made. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Nothing in him that doth fade, but doth suffer the sea change into something rich and strange. It's a really consoling and sympathetic song, where Ariel tells the son, your father, yes, he drowned, but he was made of something beautiful, something rich and strange. His eyes became pearls. Here, on the left, Hayden uses that, but he perverts it. Deep in the festering hold. Not folk out of 5 below the sea, in the freeness of the water, but in the hold of the ship, festering. father lies dead. His bones are turned into New England pews, another reference to that religious hypocrisy. And those are altar lights that were his eyes. His eyes do not become pearls. They become the sweat, the labor, the tears that built this church. Again, he does it in the poem, even more grotesquely. Deep in the festering hole, thy father lies, he repeats again. The corpse of mercy rots him. Rats eat love's rotten, jutted eyes. So we have in the first case, the Shakespeare case, his eyes become pearls, rich and strange. And in the passage, the same drowned man rots, and the corpse of mercy rots with him. Both are dead, and rats eat his eyes. He takes the allusion to Shakespeare's The Tempest, but he strips it of all the dignity that the death has in The Tempest, and instead replaces it with this really gory image of a person who's not even treated like a person. He uses this at the very beginning of this section that I think is the thesis of the poem. So he's trying to put the reader in this perspective of something that is rotting, that is awful, the corpse of mercy. Mercy is dead. The whole world is ended here. But, oh, the living look at you with human eyes. Even though their eyes are eaten by rats, he recognizes here in the poem the traitor that is, that they're human eyes. And they strike at you. The fear that stalks the watches doesn't leave you. You are afraid that they will come. And that is the fear in the poem that's carried all the way through. The fear of the person who knows, maybe on some level, that they are doing something awful and inhumane. You cannot stare that hatred down. You cannot kill the deep immortal human wish, the timeless will. So as much as you might try, and as much as you might put these people below deck to rot with the corpse of mercy, you cannot actually kill them. You cannot kill the wish to live, the wish for freedom. So the allusion deepens all of this because it brings with it the entire heritage of Shakespeare's play around the beauty and the richness of death. Here is the beauty and the richness of life in death. And speaking of life in death, we saw that once this week with Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. So the task was to find the allusion to Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. But if you're watching the video, you missed it. I'll just tell you where it is. Try finding it for a second. There's two places in the first section where the diary entry pops up for the first time. 8 bells, I cannot sleep. There's a great line where he says, which one of us is Captain Albatross? It's a direct line to Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Later, he says, the slaves below deck tore their flesh and sucked the blood because they were dying of thirst, just like the Ancient Mariner in the rhyme. So in both cases, Haydn is referring to, alluding to this very famous poem. And he's using those images of the bad luck of the albatross here, but of course here it's through irony and hypocrisy. The character who says which one of us killed an albatross is so blind to his own evil or his own actions that he cannot realize they are all killing albatrosses left and right by carrying a cargo of 500 human souls to their fate to be held as slaves for the rest of their lives. That is killing an albatross. But he doesn't see them as people, and so he doesn't see his cries and crying. Instead, he just says, which one of us killed an albatross? So the blindness of the traitor is what's really highlighted there. Ironically, it's also a section where literally everybody's going blind on the ship. So this is for you to study in your BGD. There's a lot there, and I'm giving you some things. You can write about any of those things, or you can choose something new that you want to review. Your task is to write a thesis and a first body paragraph exploring this prompt. Explain how the structure of the middle passage illustrates the meaning of the poem as a whole. You can consider elements like stanza patterns, where it's arranged, how it's arranged, enjambment, the way that lines break, or allusions. So you kind of decide if you want to pick Monday, Tuesday, or today's focus to write that in your time. I'll give you feedback later.